Taoist priest. Him. I've read it 100 times, yet I still don't understand its meaning. Really? Really? I was afraid of miscounting, so I read it over 100 times. I see. Why do I still not understand its meaning? It's my mistake, the Taoist thought for a moment before recalling. I forgot to tell you that in ancient sayings, numbers like 100 and 1,000 are generally used metaphorically. Metaphorically? It doesn't mean its literal meaning. 100 doesn't actually mean 100, and 1,000 doesn't mean 1,000 either. Then what does it mean? It refers to a large quantity. A large quantity. Reading 100 times means you should read it many times, not literally 100 times. The Taoist patiently explained. Sometimes it could be 100 times, sometimes more than 100, or even 10,000 times. However, you don't need to worry. First, this matter is like cultivation. It cannot be rushed. If you want to finish in a day, no matter how many times you read, it may not work. It should follow the natural flow. As the Taoist spoke, he reached out to pat the little girl's head, feeling warm in his heart. Secondly, poetry doesn't always have to have a clear meaning. Sometimes, just understanding the artistic conception within is enough. I don't understand. You'll slowly understand it naturally. Okay. At that moment, a few people from the jianghu appeared ahead. They were all dressed in coarse linen clothes, wandering along the mountain path, looking left and right. Occasionally, one of them would dash up to a nearby height and stretch their neck to peek into the dense grass. They appeared to be searching the mountain, hoping for luck. There are people ahead. The heroine lowered her voice to remind Xianxia. This group of people looks somewhat familiar. I ran into them yesterday afternoon. I see. The heroine wanted to remind him not to show any signs of weakness, to be more composed. Perhaps they could muddle through. But when she glanced at the Taoist, she found him as calm as ever, his steps and breathing unchanged. There was no need for her to remind him. She still wanted to discuss a strategy for how to handle any potential conflict that might arise, to find the simplest, quickest, and cleanest way to resolve it. However, after sizing up these people, she figured that even if they weren't small fry in the jianghu, they didn't seem like top-notch experts either. With the backing of the Grand Commander's estate and the Taoist's calm demeanor, she felt there was no need for her to worry. So she just walked alongside him, looking ahead. And Song Yu and his group saw these few jianghu heroes. They noticed them as well. At first, they didn't think much of it, just feeling that this group seemed somewhat familiar. But they quickly realized something was off when they spotted the long wooden box wrapped in oilcloth that Song Yu was carrying on his back. Jianghu people coming to this mountain were wary of such long, wrapped packages. Someone immediately nudged a companion next to him, gathering the group together. They stopped and exchanged glances, then turned their attention to the approaching group. There was a young Taoist leaning on a staff and a masked woman wielding a long knife. There was also a small, cute girl, blowing a whistle and looking at them with pure eyes, as well as a short horse that was hardly bigger than a donkey. The group continued to close the distance between them. The jianghu heroes stood their ground, almost rotating their heads in unison as the others approached. Some were scrutinizing the group, while others kept their eyes fixed on the package behind the Taoist, their roles clearly defined. Heroine Wu could keenly sense that, although none of these people had their hands on their weapon hilts yet, they were all tensed and ready to spring into action. Hey, you. No one was willing to risk their lives blindly, so an older jianghu hero stepped forward, his face beaming with a smile as he clasped his hands together and asked, "You just went up the mountain yesterday, and now you're coming back down." "Yes," the Taoist replied, returning the greeting, "but I didn't find the divine doctor. Since we've met twice, this must be fate. I haven't introduced myself or asked for your names yet, my fault," the jianghu hero said, bowing to them again. "I'm Zhu Qi, and these are my 4 sworn brothers. In the jianghu, they refer to us as the 5 heroes of Anzhu." After he spoke, 2 of the men behind him also introduced themselves. The other 2 seemed colder in demeanor or perhaps were aware of the situation. They didn't wish to engage and just watched Song Yu and his group in silence. "I'm Song Yu, not a jianghu hero, but a Taoist. I cultivate at Yinyang Mountain in Linquan County, Yizhu. I've brought this child on a journey here, having heard that there's a divine doctor in Changing, and came specifically to seek him out to broaden my horizons." "Ah, so you're Mr. Song. It's a pleasure to meet you." "A pleasure indeed. And this person behind you is?" Zhu Qi looked at the woman with the knife behind Song Yu. He had sensed yesterday that she was probably not someone to be trifled with. This is Heroine Wu, without a sect or affiliation. A heroine doesn't seem like someone without a sect or affiliation. If she doesn't want to say, then don't ask. All right, no questions. Zhu Qi waved his hands repeatedly, appearing easy to talk to. But then, narrowing his eyes, he looked at the package on the Taoist's back. However, what is that object you're carrying? I didn't see any of you with such an item when you went up the mountain yesterday. It's something entrusted to me by a friend. Oh, so it's something a friend entrusted to you, Zhu Qi grinned, revealing his yellowed teeth. Since it's something a friend entrusted, and it's wrapped so tightly, it would be unreasonable for us to investigate. But you must know we're searching for a treasure on this mountain, something more precious than life itself. I wonder if you could open it up for us to take a look. As soon as he finished, he added quickly, I'm not trying to make things difficult for you. After we've seen it, we'll pretend we didn't see it and leave at once if it's not what we're looking for, no matter what it is and regardless of its value. It is precisely the object you seek. The Taoist raised his hand in greeting, sincerely informing them. It was just such a sincere remark, delivered in a tone as gentle as ever. But his words were so frank that the group of jianghu heroes instantly tensed up, staring at the Taoist who bowed, hands moving toward their blades. Some had just started to reach out, while others had already gripped the knife handle, and some had pulled their blades out half a kun, but that was as far as it went. Everyone froze in their positions. It was as if the scene had been paused. All 5 remained rooted in place. Even the expressions on their faces were held as they were, some surprised, others enraged, and a few looking fierce, with their gazes darting in different directions, all frozen in time. Upon closer inspection, it was rather amusing. Heroine Wu was startled at the sight. Is that a time-freezing technique? Indeed. Impressive, Taoist master. Once again, her tone, light and casual, didn't sound like praise or flattery. It was more like a catchphrase. Toot, toot, toot. The little girl blew her whistle and walked up to one of the men, gazing up at him curiously. At that moment, another sound broke through the air. Whoosh! An arrow flew from a distance, slicing through the air. In the blink of an eye, it crossed Tenjiang. Whoosh! The heroine drew her knife and swung it in an instant. Suddenly, in a time frame where an ordinary person wouldn't be able to react, the gleaming blade was already in front of Songyu. With a sharp thwack, the arrow was accurately intercepted by the long knife. Thank you, heroine, Songyu smiled and bowed to her. Heroine Wu, however, paid him no mind. With a flash of her knife, she chased after the direction from which the arrow had come. Songyu's smile grew even more pronounced. Oh, the jianghu heroes in this world didn't possess the ability to defy gravity or split mountains with their blades. Taoists were not omnipotent either. Most merely learned some Taoist techniques. To put it bluntly, 99% of the Taoists in this world wouldn't necessarily win against jianghu heroes in a conflict. The techniques of cultivators from the Taoist sects were indeed mysterious, leaving jianghu heroes defenseless, but they themselves struggled to withstand the swords and blades of those jianghu heroes. Even if there were Taoists who could summon wind and rain with their prayers, or call forth thunder with a wave of their hand, or easily subdue vengeful spirits, as long as they lacked the skill to be impervious to blades and bullets, and had no other means of self-preservation, they could still be killed by a single strike to the head, or shot through the body by an arrow. They might think that Taoists would attain enlightenment after getting killed by weapons, but how many Taoists truly achieve enlightenment after dying by swords and clubs? Life was but 100 years, and mastering Tao was difficult. Few could excel in all aspects. Therefore, while this heroine appeared relaxed on the surface, she remained vigilant. She was prepared for a sneak attack, fearing that this powerful Taoist might be shot dead by a hidden arrow. Although Song Yu did not need to be saved, he should be grateful to her. Moments later, accompanied by a series of pleading voices, heroine Wu returned, dragging a burly man whose arms were thicker than his legs. She casually tossed the man at Song Yu's feet and replied, "You're welcome." Song Yu looked at the man on the ground and smiled, asking, "Are you also one of the 5 heroes of Anju?" Yes. Turns out there are 6 heroes instead of 5 heroes of Anju. Song Yu nodded and remarked, "You all are quite clever." Spare me, Taoist elder. That arrow was aimed directly at my heart. How could I let you off the hook? Spare me, Taoist elder. Ah, right, I aimed for your leg. It's all because I'm not skilled with a bow. The burly man repeatedly bowed his head, pleading, "Spare me, Taoist elder, spare me." Clever indeed. Everything I said is true. Spare me, Taoist elder. I don't enjoy killing. I'll only ask you one question. Answer correctly and I'll let you go, Song Yu stated. Answer incorrectly and it'll be an eye for an eye. I'll make you return to the earth and sky as dust. Spare me, Taoist elder. Just answer correctly. Have you killed anyone? Song Yu paused for a moment before adding, innocent people. The burly man was taken aback, and he quickly began to bow his head even more fervently, answering, "Taoist elder, please see clearly. I've mostly only done things like stealing or causing trouble for others. How could I have killed any innocent people? Though there was one time when we encountered mountain bandits by the roadside who wouldn't let us pass. We fought back and ended up killing a few, but if we hadn't killed them, we would have died ourselves." "Are you lying?" "I'm telling the truth. I'm not lying." "Raise your head." The burly man nervously lifted his head to look at the Taoist. As soon as their eyes met, he was startled. The Taoist's gaze was as calm as water, yet as vast as the sea. "Have you killed any innocent people?" the Taoist asked again, his tone unchanged. In the burly man's heart, it seemed as if a sea had emerged. At first, the waters were calm, but soon waves began to rise. The smaller ones were ripples, while the larger ones were surges, countless layers crashing against each other, each one splashing water as they echoed the Taoist's question. This left him stunned, unable to tell a lie. "I have." "How many?" "2, 3. Boom. A surge of flames erupted from within, engulfing him. "Ah!" a scream immediately echoed. The little girl was very close to him and found it strange. There was clearly fire, yet it didn't feel hot. She couldn't help but cautiously reach out to touch it, but found she couldn't touch it at all. When she looked again, the Taoist had pulled her close and covered her eyes. Yet the fire was indeed real, burning the burly man as he rolled on the ground, crying out in pain. "Taoist master, you have quite the skill." Heroine Wu squinted her eyes, staring at the figure gradually being burned to nothing, leaving only his clothes behind. She chuckled. "I've heard that many extraordinary people in the jianghu spend their whole lives mastering just 1 or 2 skills, while the high achievers in palaces and temples usually only learn 3 to 5. Yet you, Taoist master, are so young and already possess so many spells." "It's just a few minor tricks, not worth mentioning." "What about these 5? Heroine Wu turned her gaze to the remaining 5 jianghu men. "Hey, you." The Taoist looked at them, paused for a moment, and asked, "Have you ever killed any innocent people?" The wind rustled, but no one answered. The 5 jianghu men were frozen in place. Some turned their eyes this way, catching glimpses with their peripheral vision, while others looked away, unable to see what was happening here. Yet they could hear the sounds, and from the sounds, they understood what was transpiring and the Taoist's abilities. At this moment, upon hearing the Taoist's question, their hearts were filled with extreme fear. Fear, anxiety, and regret churned within them. At times, they felt they were facing a divine immortal. At others, they recalled the innocent lives they had recklessly taken, believing that their retribution had finally arrived, leading to an even deeper sense of dread and remorse. Their hearts were in chaos, burning as if on fire. Boom! Immediately, flames erupted from the bodies of 3 of them. However, unlike the first victim, these 3 could not move or make a sound. They simply stood there like wooden stakes, reduced to ashes. What the other 2 were thinking remained unknown. "What kind of technique is this?" "The fire element spell." "So impressive." "It's not that impressive," the Taoist explained calmly. "The first person that the heroine brought back was already terrified and filled with unease. He was fearful and suspicious, and upon my provoking of his regret, it was easy for the heart fire to consume him and turn him to ash. The next 3, upon witnessing that person's fate, felt the same anxiety and fear. The fire ignited from their own hearts, not from my hands." "What about these last 2? The heroine turned her attention to the remaining 2. "The Taoist should not create more killings. I am not one who enjoys slaughter. Besides those who openly bear malice toward me, I do not take the lives of others," the Taoist said patiently. "These 2 have managed to evade my questioning, so they likely haven't killed any innocents. However, since they are also part of the 5 heroes of Anju, they cannot be considered good people. Let's leave them here." "How long?" "For 1 day and night." "How interesting." Though there were people here, they were still high in the mountains. During the day, it might be safe, but at night, there were wolves. Moreover, with so many jianghu people gathered in these mountains, surviving a day and a night in this place would be no easy feat, yet it wouldn't be impossible either. It seemed like a test of fortune was in order. Boom! Suddenly, a muffled sound rumbled overhead. The girl and the woman both looked up. "It's going to rain," the Taoist said to them. The girl blinked her eyes, and the woman frowned. "That won't do. My divine steed cannot get wet. If it rains, it might fall ill." Heroine Wu pointed ahead. "I remember there's a pavilion by the roadside where we can take shelter from the rain." "Let's go." "Are you coming too?" "Of course." "Aren't you in a hurry to descend the mountain?" "I'm not in a hurry." Some jianghu people are reckless and would give up their lives for treasures. "Exactly, it's a good chance to observe." The Taoist took the lead and began to walk. The mountain wind rushed toward them, causing their robes to flutter and their hair to dance in the breeze. The grass and bushes along the path bent low, and looking out over the mountains, it was a vast and spectacular sight. Indeed, there were many jianghu people in the mountains. As they walked along, they encountered countless figures, both visible and hidden. Some jianghu people, seeing the Taoist, offered a mix of courtesy and deception. They introduced themselves and asked questions before making any decisions. Whether to engage in combat or to establish rules for a duel varied among them. Others, confident in their abilities, drew their blades without a word. Some hid in the shadows, preparing their hidden arrows. Some, seeing that the Taoist man possessed great skills, dared not approach. They took a few glances and then quietly slipped away, not knowing where they went. Different choices inevitably led to different outcomes. Gradually, they spotted the pavilion that the heroine had mentioned. Though it was halfway up the mountain, it jutted out over a cliff, built by some cultured individual. It was the perfect place for enjoying the scenery. The three people and the horse entered the pavilion first. Before long, the rain began to fall. It came down heavily and suddenly. The Taoist sat calmly in the pavilion, neither annoyed by the earlier disturbances from the jianghu people nor troubled by having burned 7 or 8 individuals. He seemed entirely unfazed. Looking out from the pavilion, each raindrop appeared like a short streak, hanging all over the air between heaven and earth. The rain pattered on the leaves and struck the pavilion roof, creating a symphony of different sounds. There was a constant thick mist in the mountains, and when the heavy rain poured down, it rose like vapor and enveloped the layers of green mountains in a semi-transparent veil. The already beautiful scenery transformed into a scene from a landscape painting. The jianghu people began to arrive at this location, one after another. Perhaps some knew about the pavilion and came to seek shelter from the rain, while others, having heard from those who slipped away, gathered specifically to seek treasures. However, no one acted rashly. They stood outside the pavilion, getting drenched in the rain while staring intently at the people inside. Gradually, more and more gathered. What began as a dozen turned into 20, then from 20 to 30 or 40, eventually growing to nearly 100, perhaps even more. They continued to multiply. Some came alone, while others arrived in groups of 3 or 5. Some stood scattered along the front path and halfway up the slope, while others clustered together, forming a dense, dark mass in the heavy rain. The jianghu people each wielded different weapons: knives, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, and forks. They had it all. Not only were their weapons diverse, but their attire varied as well. Some dressed well, while others looked disheveled. Some wore straw raincoats, others sported bamboo hats. Some stood in the rain, their hair soaking and clumping together. Faintly, the sound of galloping horses could be heard from below the mountain, indicating that someone was hastily rushing over after hearing the news. It truly highlighted the immense allure of this legendary masterpiece. These jianghu people either stood alone and clutched their weapons as they stared at the Taoist and the woman in the pavilion, or they huddled together and whispered, though their voices were drowned out by the heavy rain. The multitude of gazes and weapons converged, creating a rare atmosphere of tension, mingled with the din of the downpour. Inside the pavilion, the seated and standing figure spoke quietly to each other. There must be 200 or 300 people out there. With so many, not just me, if we called in Shu Yifan and Lin Dihai together, we still might not hold them back. It'll be up to you, Taoist master. If you can't manage, I won't be of any help. Thank you, heroine. The seated Taoist remained unhurried, enjoying the rain and observing the jianghu people, a smile creeping onto his lips. What do you think, heroine? What? Doesn't this feel like the great Liuzhang gathering back in the day? Heroine Wu looked up and examined the scene carefully before replying with a smile. There were many more people at the great Liuzhang gathering than here, but I do see quite a few skilled individuals from the jianghu. The Taoist did not respond further. At that moment, someone stepped forward from the crowd. It was an older jianghu man with graying hair and a beard, wearing a bamboo hat. He raised his voice and called out, "Taoist elder inside, I am Ling Yun. Greetings." As he spoke, he cupped his hands in greeting. Ling Yun, formerly of the Jindao sect, he now roams in Changing, known by the nickname No Mercy. A few years ago, he served as a guest in the household of the Minister of Rites. I wonder if he came here on his own or was sent on a secret mission from the minister to seek out the painting, Heroine Wu whispered from the side. I've heard that your powers are formidable and your guards are skilled as well. But with so many of us, we are no pushovers. Since you possess such great cultivation skills, why bother contesting for treasure with us mortals? Hey, he says I'm your guard. I'm Guan Shaoji. A slightly overweight middle-aged man stepped forward. Elder Ling's words make sense. Since you're a master, why risk your life's cultivation fighting over treasure with us? Losing would ruin your cultivation, winning would only invite a life of being hunted down. Either way, it's a loss, he stated. He's Guan Shaoji from Yizhu. We are fellow townsmen. I don't know which sect he's from, but he has a brother named Guan Meiki. His brother has been in Changing for many years and is quite particular about his work. Another similarly stout middle-aged man stepped forward. I've heard that you just introduced yourself as being from Linquan County in Yizhu, Taoist elder. Hee. Although I haven't visited your Yin-Yang mountain or burned incense, I can still consider myself half a townsman. There's really no need for us to come to blows, right, Taoist elder? That would be Guan Meiki. I'm Kui Fengji from Changzhou. A young man stepped up. I'm not trying to offend. No matter how great your cultivation skill is, you should consider that we have so many jianghu heroes gathered here, many of whom carry bows and arrows. Don't even mention hundreds of knives rushing at once. Even if they all drew their bows and shot arrows, you haven't attained immortality and might not be able to withstand it, Taoist master. Kui Fengji is a pseudonym. His real name is Kui Miao. He often hangs around the ghost market, pretending to be an expert fighter. He looks impressive, but those in the know realize he can't even catch up with a dog. I'm Zai Yisheng, here to watch the show. I just wanted to say, please don't accidentally harm me, Taoist master. Zai Yisheng is from the legendary biggest jianghu sect, the Yun sect. He's from the Zai family. You must have seen his brother at the great Liujiang gathering before. The Yun sect is stationed just outside Changing and has numerous connections within Changing and even at the court. Among so many people here, he's the one you definitely shouldn't provoke. Song Yu quietly watched the scene unfold. He had heard heroine Wu mention at the great Liujiang gathering that the Yun sect was a disgrace to the jianghu. However, later during storytelling sessions, the narrators spoke highly of them, and the jianghu people in Changing treated them with considerable respect. When Zai Yisheng suddenly declared his identity, it caused a stir among the crowd of jianghu people, who began to whisper and glance around. Those further away, unable to hear Zai Yisheng's voice over the sound of the rain, quickly inquired with those in front. Upon learning that someone from the Yun sect had also arrived, another wave of commotion ensued. The commotion took a long time to settle down. Finally, someone spoke to Song Yu. I've heard that you are not a jianghu person, Taoist elder. From my perspective, even if you are entrusted by someone to keep the items safe, there's no need to be so persistent. At this moment, we are essentially coercing you. In life and death situations, you wouldn't be breaking your promises. Please hand over what you have, and we will decide its fate. Please hand over the painting, Taoist elder. You can freeze one person in place, but can you freeze several people at once? Can you freeze all of us, several hundred? Hand over the painting and consider it a purchase. We will gather some money to thank you. Once we leave, regardless of who the treasures belong to, everyone will agree to say we seized it from you, Taoist elder. How about that? Taoist elder. Outside the pavilion, the wind and rain grew fiercer, and thunder rumbled. More and more jianghu people stepped forward, each contributing their thoughts. Some were urging, others pressing, some leaving room for negotiation, while others held sharp remarks, each exhibiting their own character. This, perhaps, was the essence of jianghu culture expressed through their words. The Taoist listened, finding it all quite amusing. Boom. Rumble. The thunder rolled, and the world darkened. A summer storm ravaged the trees and grasses in the mountains, and amidst the rustling, the sound of snapping branches could be heard from time to time. Raindrops dripped down from the eaves of the pavilion, coursing down branches and blades of grass, and flowing down the hats and hair of the jianghu people. In the heavy rain, everything appeared somewhat blurred, yet also strikingly clear. Seeing the Taoist remain seated and silent in the pavilion while their own numbers grew larger, the jianghu people felt more at ease. Not only were more skilled jianghu experts gathering, but also members from many prominent jianghu sects, as well as some well-informed individuals that everyone knew were working for powerful ministers in the court. With so many people, the atmosphere became increasingly confident, and they edged closer to the pavilion. However, the Taoist turned his gaze toward the distant scenery. Boom! Midst the thunder, the Taoist finally stood up. The clamor of the jianghu people suddenly paused. The jianghu heroine in the pavilion glanced at the crowd. No matter how skilled she was, she feared that in a mass of people like this, she wouldn't be able to make much of an impact. But since she couldn't win a fight, there was no point in being afraid. She grasped her long sword and moved closer, seemingly just wanting to observe the commotion. The girl behind her glanced at the fierce jianghu people outside, then looked up at her Taoist priest, tugging at his robe. It's fine, the Taoist said softly to her, then stepped forward. Stopping at the edge of the pavilion, the Taoist didn't look at the jianghu people, but instead turned to a certain direction and asked, "Why are you here to watch the show, senior?" As his words fell, the reactions among the jianghu people varied. Some were momentarily stunned, some were confused, and some looked in the direction he pointed. Others saw nothing and withdrew their gaze, thinking to advise the Taoist not to put on airs. However, before they could react, a massive thunderclap echoed through the heavens and the earth. Boom! The sound was continuous and deafening. No, it wasn't thunder. It was the sound coming from the mountain. The jianghu people widened their eyes, keenly sensing that something was amiss. They looked around, trying to find reassurance in the faces of those nearby, but all they saw reflected their own wariness. In that instant, another rumble resounded. The ground began to tremble, as if the very heavens and earth were about to collapse. Fortunately, the jianghu people were well grounded, allowing them to maintain their footing on the road. "Look!" one jianghu person shouted, pointing in a direction. It was the very direction the Taoist had been looking at earlier. Everyone turned to gaze, only to see the mist and rain in the mountains suddenly swirling like silk being waved by a hand, gradually gathering together. Prescription: A tilde letter 1033D, a letter 10331 open AS. Such an extraordinary sight was not a mere trick of the jianghu entertainers, but an anomaly of the entire world. As the mist and rain fully coalesced, the crowd gasped in shock. It was none other than a colossal serpent winding its way through the mountains. The massive serpent appeared to be made entirely of clouds and mist, insubstantial and ethereal, its length and size unknown. It curled up, filling the valley before them. Notably, it had 2 small horns on its head. It's the snake immortal. The snake immortal has manifested. With 2 horns on its head, could it truly have transformed into a dragon? The earth trembled once more as the giant mist serpent moved through the mountains, slowly turning its head to look their way. In the ethereal mist, the giant serpent's features were obscured, and its eyes were not visible. Yet, this enchanting scene with such a colossal creature made everyone's hearts race with fear. This was no mere sleight of hand. Everyone was taken aback, their faces pale. Although they had long heard that the snake immortal held a divine position and was kind-hearted, never harming others, it was still just hearsay. They dared not feel certain of its nature. Moreover, they had also heard that the snake immortal disliked conflict and violence, often punishing evildoers. With so many of them standing here with weapons, who could know if they had angered the snake immortal? At this moment, separated by half a mountain chasm, they locked eyes with the enormous and ethereal snake immortal. There was no trace of kindness or benevolence to be found on the serpent's head. The giant serpent, formed from swirling rain and mist, was insubstantial and ethereal. It was gliding along the mountainside, brushing past them with countless gusts of wind and rain that knocked them off balance and left them staggering. Whoosh! The jianghu people had no time to react. They could only struggle to steady themselves, grabbing hold of anything they could with their faces distorted by the force of the wind. Their hats were whisked away effortlessly, and their raincoats torn apart. As they witnessed the wind and rain brought by the giant mist serpent rapidly intensifying, accompanied by the trembling of the earth, they felt utterly powerless to resist. Even those who drew their swords and swung wildly at the mist could strike nothing at all. The sounds of wind, rain, and breaking branches mixed with the anguished cries of the jianghu people, and the whinnies of horses resounded throughout the land. By the time the giant mist serpent had passed through more than half of its length, all the jianghu people were swept up by the serpent. With a gentle flick of its tail, they were unceremoniously thrown off the cliff. The only ones left unharmed were the pavilion and its occupants. The woman and the little girl had already been left in a daze. The yellow-maned horse was in a state of panic. Whoosh! The giant serpent glided around the mountain, then returned to the hollow in front, coiling up and lifting its head to gaze at the pavilion. The Taoist stood in the pavilion, meeting its gaze. Narrowing his eyes, he pondered for a moment before raising his hand in greeting. "Thank you for your assistance, senior." The giant mist serpent remained still, its expression inscrutable. After less than a breath, it suddenly burst apart, scattering all the rain and mist back into the mountains. The woman and the little girl widened their eyes, one in a stupor and the other in confusion. They saw countless streams of dissipating mist flowing down the distant mountainside, crashing like water against the shore. It seemed as though that figure lingered in their vision, along with the scene of the jianghu people utterly powerless to resist, leaving them astonished. What was that? The little girl turned her gaze toward the Taoist. That would be the legendary snake immortal, the Taoist replied as he walked toward the edge of the pavilion closest to the cliff. How can a snake be that big? That isn't the true form of the snake immortal. It's merely a manifestation of its magic used to aid us, the Taoist said, gently patting the little girl's head as he stared at the cliff before them. But the snake immortal is indeed quite remarkable. That's amazing. Yes. Can I be that powerful in the future? Of course. The cliff before them was steep, descending straight to the base of the mountain. Fortunately, it wasn't vertical but had a certain curve, covered with grass and trees. Being thrown down from here wouldn't necessarily mean death, but surviving wouldn't be easy either. One also had to consider their own fortune. At this moment, with a glance down, countless figures were visible below. Some were on the cliff and might survive, while others had already reached the bottom. If they weren't top-tier jianghu heroes, they likely wouldn't have made it. Song Yu sighed and shook his head. He couldn't tell whether the snake immortal really had any old ties with the grandmaster of the hidden dragon temple, nor did he know if the immortal was aware or suspected that he was an heir of the hidden dragon temple. Naturally, he also didn't know if the immortal had simply learned of his good deeds and wanted to help as it couldn't bear to see him struggle, or if it was merely a casual greeting to the disciple of an old acquaintance. Regardless, since the immortal had offered assistance, it was only right to express gratitude. However, at this moment, he could sense that the snake immortal had already departed. Well then, he would come looking for it again next time. Sigh. The Taoist shook his head and sighed once more. Oh, the snake immortal had good intentions. These jianghu people would not easily give up. The immortal's help today was merely a temporary fix, addressing only the present. As long as these jianghu people were unaware of his true abilities, they wouldn't truly believe they could never take this painting from him, and they would inevitably return to find him. If they came in dribs and drabs, it would be even more troublesome. There was no use in overthinking. It was better to watch the rain. Gradually, the Taoist's heart settled down. Meanwhile, Heroine Wu ventured out of the pavilion, braving the rain. Ahead, many weapons and bags had been dropped by the jianghu people. She didn't hesitate, picking through the scattered items and selecting several decent swords and daggers to stow in her bag, thinking she could sell them at the ghost market. If she came across a money pouch, she would open it to check inside. She meticulously examined every coin, ensuring not to leave even a single copper coin behind, which she would tuck into her own possession. When she returned to ask the Taoist if he wanted any coins, he smiled and shook his head, so she decided to give the extra coins to the girl beside her as pocket money. The girl treasured them dearly. When she accidentally dropped a copper coin on the ground, she hurried to pick it up, afraid it would roll outside the pavilion and fall off the cliff. Then, she stuffed all the coins into her embrace, making her chest bulge with their weight. From below the mountain, occasional cries of pain and wails could be heard. Before long, the rain stopped. Summer rains really did come and go swiftly, just like summer sunshine. Almost as soon as the downpour ceased, the clouds parted. A beam of sunlight shone down, illuminating the mountain ahead. The group didn't linger, and immediately began their descent. "Do you want to ride a horse, Lady Calico?" the woman asked the girl beside the Taoist as she sat atop her horse. "No. It's so hard to walk on the muddy path." "No. It will get your shoes dirty." "No, it won't. If you want to ride, I'll let you have the horse. You don't need to ride with me, you can ride alone. How about that?" "We have our own horse." "Then forget it." Heroine Wu shook her head, asking no further questions. She glanced over at the Taoist and thought for a moment before smiling and saying, "I think I've figured it out." "What do you mean?" "You want to help that man surnamed Du," Heroine Wu said. "The reason you're walking down the mountain so boldly is so that everyone knows this painting is no longer in the hands of that man surnamed Du. The reason you mention you cultivate on Yinyang Mountain in Linquan County of Yizhu to anyone you meet is so that those who wish to find you in the future will know where to look." "Thank you, Heroine." "What are you thanking me for?" "I have done no good deed, but you spoke up for me." "Don't mention it." There was no need for further words. They just needed to be careful as they made their way down the mountain. After the rain, the sun shone like gold, bright and somewhat dazzling. The mountain path was slippery and hard to traverse. Perhaps it was because the giant and eye-catching cloud serpent formed by the gathering mist from the nearby mountains was so visible that they could see it from a distance. Or perhaps it was due to the echoes of the cries and shouts from the jianghu people that spread throughout the mountains. As they descended, they encountered no one heading up, saving them a good deal of effort. "Are you still going to the ghost market?" "Of course." "You're taking this painting with you." "Once we leave this mountain, no one should know what's inside this box, right?" "That depends on the information these jianghu people have." "Then we'll see." It's the 16th today. We should reach the ghost market by tomorrow afternoon. We can wait a bit and head out when it gets dark, Heroine Wu said, as she had some items to sell. She added, there are inns inside the market where we can stay, and there are also taverns in the nearby village. We can choose where to stay. In any case, we'll browse for one night and then head back to the city in the morning. Heroine, you have everything arranged perfectly. You're welcome. By the time they reached the bottom of the mountain, it was already dusk. They found a place to spend the night and fell asleep to the scent of the grass ropes woven by the heroine. The next morning, they set off again toward changing. The sound of the girl's whistle echoed along the way. May 17th was a bright sunny day. It was the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. With the sun at its peak, the world's yang energy reached its zenith while the spirits and ghosts grew weaker. Even the most powerful of ghosts dared not venture out during the day. From early in the morning, the sun shone down directly on the earth, making it feel scorchingly hot even when covered with cloth. It was truly a typical summer day. The Taoist expressed gratitude to the family from whom they borrowed lodging, while Heroine Wu took out a small handful of copper coins. She offered a few flattering words before the host accepted them. Little girl beside her, seeing this, felt she too had borrowed a place to stay and didn't want to be treated differently. Thus, she took out a small handful of copper coins from her own pocket, trying to offer them to the host. The host, being kind-hearted, couldn't accept the coins again after already taking Heroine Wu's money. The little girl, imitating Heroine Wu, began to speak in her gentle, soft voice, saying a string of identical flattering words. The host still refused to accept her coins, leaving the little girl confused. She stared blankly at the host, unable to figure out what was wrong. It wasn't until the Taoist spoke up that the host finally accepted the coins. The little girl was instantly filled with joy. After leaving the village, as they walked along the road, she remained cheerful. She blew on her newly picked horse Dung Jiao Jiao and playfully jumped beside the Taoist, stepping on his shadow. The ground was still a bit muddy. Heroine Wu leaned over her small horse, her upper body resting down. She looked rather lethargic, yet her voice was clear and steady as she spoke to the Taoist. Speaking of the established rules, the only rule of the ghost market is not to inquire about others' identities or backgrounds. If you're a seller, it doesn't matter who the buyer is. If you're a buyer, you shouldn't care about the seller either. Only the goods and the price matter. That's why many people come here to trade things that shouldn't see the light of day. There are too many things in changing that are best kept hidden, both visible and invisible, tangible and intangible. The city can longer do without the ghost market. Sounds quite similar to a black market. Indeed. Are there any other unwritten rules? Too many. The Taoist glanced at the little girl beside him, who was following his shadow and insisted on stepping on it, and quietly said, "Please tell us more, heroine." She said, "For example, once a deal is made, there are no returns or exchanges. If you buy a fake tough luck, you can't return it. If you receive counterfeit money, it also can't be refunded. Whether you overpay or get a good deal depends on your own skills. Also, the place is chaotic, so be cautious. Don't flaunt your wealth, especially when entering or leaving the ghost market. Don't let others perceive you as weak. If you are truly weak, it's better to be a bit more cautious and not let others realize. If you're capable, then you can be more relaxed," Heroine Wu explained. "Actually, it's not complicated. It's something everyone understands without needing to say it. These rules apply everywhere." "Do you come here often?" "I've been here quite a few times, usually to earn some pocket money or sometimes to gather some information." "Is that so? This was a more primitive market." Suddenly, the Taoist halted in his tracks. The little girl had been staring at the ground and had just taken a big step forward, aiming to step on the shadow that was supposed to be moving ahead. However, the shadow had stopped moving, and she found herself stepping into empty space, momentarily startled. Letter 1D619 A circumflex, and O grave letter 1D401 E circumflex execute. She turned and looked at the Taoist with confusion. Seeing the Taoist smile at her, she took another step. It wasn't the hottest time of the year. The sun's intensity was overwhelming. By afternoon, the ground had dried up. The footprints pressed into the yellow earth had hardened, frozen in the shape they had taken when the ground was still moist. Sometimes stepping on them would crush the hardened surface, creating a cracking sound as the dry earth shattered and scattered. Continuing along the official road, they eventually reached the small path that the heroine had pointed out earlier by the afternoon. In the distance, some villages were faintly visible. Along the way, they occasionally encountered others heading in the same direction, some dressed like farmers, while others could be easily identified as not being local villagers. As they passed through the village, many villagers stood by the roadside, asking passers-by if they needed a place to stay. Every time the ghost market opens, many people come here. Great Yan values commerce, and many sharp-minded villagers have started to engage in business, Heroine Wu explained. But don't pay them any mind. We still have a bit of distance to cover, and there are more villages ahead. We arrived early, so we can find a place closer to the market. Those who arrive late will have to stay further out. I see. Are you planning to stay inside the ghost market or outside? Is there accommodation inside? There are 2 inns carved out of the stone walls on both sides. What's the difference between staying outside and inside? If you stay outside, once you finish shopping, you'll have to come back out, and being outside might pose some dangers, Heroine Wu said. She added, those who can open an inn beneath the earth's crevices are all quite capable. The rates are expensive, but staying there guarantees your safety. It's ideal for those who aren't particularly skilled themselves, yet have shown wealth or purchased valuable items. Spending the night and coming out during the day is always safer than venturing out at night. I'd prefer to stay outside. It seems that this place was not the kind of night market where a group of people gathered, completed their transactions, and then dispersed. Instead, it was a much more permanent and organized setup. He felt grateful to this heroine. If it weren't for her, Song Yu wouldn't have learned any of this. Otherwise, he would miss out a lot on this trip. As they chatted while walking, they gradually passed 2 villages. Heroine, Taoist elder, a child's voice suddenly called out from ahead. The Taoist and the woman turned their heads to look. 2 children appeared, 1 girl and 1 boy, 1 tall and 1 short. The sister looked about 7 or 8 years old, while the brother appeared to be around 5 or 6. Their faces were both dark and flushed as they stood to the side, staring at them. Heroine, Taoist elder, do you need a place to stay? Our family's rates are cheap, and we provide breakfast. No matter how late you come back at night, someone will be awake to open the door. There are lanterns available to borrow, but you'd have to pay extra for the candles. Heroine Wu stopped to ask them, what kind of inn do you have? A thatched inn. How much for a night? 1 room is 60 yuan. Nonsense. The standard rate before sunset here is 50 yuan. Then it'll be 50 yuan. The older girl's voice became a bit softer as she discreetly glanced at the woman. Do you have 2 rooms? Yes. Let's go take a look, Heroine Wu said in a rough voice, waving her hand. The girl and boy immediately smiled, their eyes squinting with delight, and they waved their arms as they ran ahead to lead the way. The woman led her horse in that direction. Meanwhile, the Taoist followed behind, observing the 2 children as they walked. Though they were very young and thin, their voices were childish, yet their speech was clear and logical. At such a young age, they had already started taking responsibility. This was a true reflection of the lives of ordinary children in these times. In comparison, they were already quite fortunate being born here. The location was good, right next to the Earth's crevices and the ghost market, which attracts countless people from all walks of life every month for 9 days. They open for business at midnight, and some of the people here need a place to sleep for a while before heading back the next morning after exploring the market, creating business opportunities. This business opportunity had already surpassed that of nearly all farmers in the country. Though the 2 children were young and already out to attract customers, they seemed healthy, showing no signs of malnutrition. In this regard, they were better off than many children from ordinary families. The hardships of the common people reflected the struggles of the times. The Taoist gently patted the girl's head beside him. Thatched inns were typically simple, consisting of straw huts, some single rooms, and others large dormitories. This one was decent, with all single rooms. The Taoist woman looked around. There really wasn't much to criticize. There was only a bed inside, and it didn't seem particularly dirty or messy, nor did it have any unpleasant odors. Thus, she decided to stay. Keep an eye on my horse. That'll cost extra. The little girl glanced at her slyly. 20 yuan. Hey, you little rascal. If you don't pay, I won't be responsible if it gets lost. Is feeding the horse included? Feeding hay to the horse costs 30 yuan. What kind of hay? The grass I cut from the mountain myself. Don't you have any adults at home? My mother is still sleeping. She needs to guard the door and the horse at night. All right, Heroine Wu agreed and said, take good care of my horse and make sure it's well fed. Don't let it get lost. This is my beloved steed. If it goes missing, my blade won't spare you. Don't worry, we'll take care of your horse. Heroine Wu handed the reins to her. Receiving an extra sum of money, the little girl happily led the horse away, her height not even reaching the horse's back. It was interesting to note that after leaving Yizhu, Song Yu had not seen a horse shorter than Heroine Wu's. It seemed that once he left the southwest, no one rode the short southwest horses anymore. Let's wait until it gets dark. Okay. The two returned to their respective rooms. The Taoist wandered around the door, observing the village and the various people coming and going. He returned to his room and sat for a while, contemplating the spiritual resonance of the summer solstice, until the yang energy in the world gradually weakened. When he opened his eyes, he found it was already dusk. Outside, the heroine was talking to the siblings running the thatched inn. She shared her unusual experiences in the jianghu, some of which were tales the Taoist had told her. She was quite the talkative one. The sky gradually darkened. After having dinner, they set off directly. The ghost market was underground, with no high mountains nearby. One wouldn't see the fissure unless they got close. However, the ground had long been trampled into a wide path. As they approached, they could see the gaping scar on the earth, a long, deep fissure resembling a narrow cliff only a few jianghu wide. At this hour, the sky was already dark. Below was pitch black, with only occasional flickering lights visible, presumably lit by some unknown person. The fissure was deep, about 10 jianghu down. Thus, even when bending down to look, one could only see a few small red dots. Following the fissure, there were paths leading down. Yet some of these paths were merely platforms one could step on, accessible only to those with exceptional skills. Others were small, slanted routes carved out, leading downward. The number of people on the path continued to increase as heroine Wu found a relatively nearby spot to descend. As the Taoist walked down, he glanced around, using the faint light to observe the different layers of soil and rock. Slowly, they reached the very bottom. At this point, it was almost completely dark, and they could only see by the light of their lanterns. When they first arrived, they were at the ordinary bottom of the fissure, where the ground was littered with rubble, debris, and even dung, as well as bones of both humans and animals. The smell was quite unpleasant, and the walls on either side were ordinary stone. However, they saw lights ahead after walking a short distance, and the stone walls had been carved into various spaces. The more refined ones resembled houses, while the less refined looked like caves, some even having built-up floors. It was far more bustling and formal than Song you had imagined. Most of the carved shops had their lights lit, and every street vendor without exception had an oil lamp placed in front of their stall. The stalls were not very densely packed, with frequent gaps in between, suggesting that it wasn't yet the peak time for business. The many lights converged, illuminating the stone walls and caves on both sides, casting light on faces covered with cloth or masked. The numerous gazes crossed paths, creating a unique atmosphere. It resembled the demon and ghost market in the mountains of Pingzhu from years ago, yet it was also quite different. There aren't many people right now, so you can find a place to wait or take a stroll. It's only about 3 or 4 li down from here, heroine Wu said to him. While it's still quiet, I'll set up my stall to sell these items. I'm worried I might run into someone who recognizes me when it gets busier. Once I sell everything, I'll split the earnings with you. Then I'll go for a walk. All right. Heroine Wu casually found an empty spot, took out the swords and knives she had picked up yesterday, and set them out on the ground. Beside her stood a tall, thin man who covered his face, and he made a chilling remark. This isn't usually your spot, is it, miss? It's none of your business, heroine Wu replied sharply, her cold gaze silencing him. The Taoist chuckled at this. She was demonstrating the local rules to him. He exchanged a glance with the girl beside him before stepping forward, while behind him, heroine Wu's voice rang out. Rare swords and blades. A top-quality Taoquan blade. Tanxi sword. Nearby, a man reeking of sweat suddenly struck a match. As the sparks ignited a small flame, he lit an oil lamp. Holding the lamp, he exchanged glances with the Taoist as he passed by. Once the Taoist was out of sight, he settled down, placing the lamp on his own stall. In the dim light, there were various precious utensils on display, exuding a strong, deathly aura. They were likely burial items. The Taoist averted his gaze and continued forward, while heroine Wu's calls faded into the distance. As he walked along, he passed by countless people. In this ghost market, jianghu heroes made up only a small portion. The majority were individuals from all walks of life. Very few, like the Taoist and the girl, openly revealed their faces. Most people revealed only their eyes. Some murmured to themselves, discussing the secrets of the imperial palace and court disputes, speaking of matters that were not easily discussed outside. The Taoist looked at them, and they glanced back at him. He ignored them, and they did not inquire about him either. It was still early, and both vendors and customers were few, making it a good time to observe this fissure in the earth. The stone walls on both sides of the fissure appeared natural, some rough and some smooth, with stone patterns varying from deep to shallow, resembling a natural crack. However, if a great power had truly torn open the earth, the edges of the fissure would likely look similar. So it was impossible to determine the truth of the rumors. What truly drew attention were the walls of stone. This fissure lay deep and long outside the city, with countless branches branching off between the main fissure. It was adjacent to the capital, and except at noon, sunlight rarely reached the bottom. Thus, it was a natural hiding place for refugees, beggars, outlaws, and even demons and ghosts. Everywhere there were traces left by them. Looking at the stone walls on either side, wherever it was possible to carve, there were various scribbles. There were wall paintings, inscriptions, and chaotic lines. From the marks, some were left by hard objects like stones, while others were inscribed by sharp items such as swords and daggers. The Taoist held up the lantern, leaning in to observe closely and reflect deeply. Some of the wall paintings were quite simple, composed of the most basic lines, exuding pure, primitive emotions. Others were intricate, depicting various plants, animals, and human figures, showcasing the artist's considerable skill in carving and painting. It was a mystery how such talent had ended up here. Some artworks radiated peace and tranquility, while others twisted and contorted. There were also some that were simply chaotic scribbles. The carved inscriptions were even more complex. In terms of handwriting, one could find everything from painfully ugly to remarkably elegant strokes right here. Looking at the content, there were simple, calm narratives detailing names and events, who fell into this place, in what year and month, and under what circumstances the words were written. There were also curses directed at parents, enemies, and corrupt officials. Corresponding to this were various vile curses and filthy language. Some questioned the heavens, the court, or themselves, wondering how they had come to this point. There were heartfelt prayers, seeking to escape their predicaments, or those who believed they were beyond salvation due to their deep sins, praying for divine forgiveness and hoping their families would not suffer the consequences. Some even included poetry and essays, with quite a few being well written. Before the ghost market formed, those who ended up here were either destitute and homeless or trying to escape something. In the dim light, the stone walls on either side bore the weight of their thoughts, emotions, and hopes. The Taoist occasionally lifted the lantern, then lowered it to the ground, examining each piece as if he could glimpse their past selves. Years and time were all encapsulated within. Gazing at it all evoked a deep sense of resonance. Was this not also a form of cultivation? Years from now, if this place still existed, it might become a scenic spot. Yet, who knew if the wall paintings and inscriptions would still be here, whether they would remain legible, and if future generations would be able to discern their age and gain a glimpse into the lives of those who once inhabited this space. The little girl beside him didn't understand what he was looking at. She followed him for a while but quickly lost interest. However, she had her own way of playing. She would wander over to the scattered stalls along the roadside, occasionally finding something that sparked her curiosity. She would crouch down to look, and then immediately chase after the Taoist once he moved on. As time passed, the place grew more lively. All sorts of people gathered here. The stone caves carved out on either side of the fissure were occupied one after another, with those who had wooden doors all opening up. Some lit lanterns or candles, while others ignited oil lamps. The fissure was suddenly filled with many lights, and these people took up most of the space along the stone walls, making it much harder for the Taoist to get closer to see. Lady Calico, the Taoist turned to look at the little girl. Lady Calico was squatting in front of a small stall, appearing quite small herself. Interestingly, despite being just a few years old and her face clearly showing innocence and curiosity, the vendors never chased her away. They merely stared at her, perhaps contemplating something. However, this time was different. The vendor in front of Lady Calico was particularly short, with just a piece of cloth laid out for his stall, displaying a few trinkets stolen from graves. Instead of looking at the stall, Lady Calico was fixated on the vendor, who trembled under her gaze as he was too afraid to meet her eyes. The Taoist approached and called out again, "Lady Calico." The little girl looked up at him, then stood up and followed him back, glancing back 3 times as she walked. "I encountered a mouse again. I told you, don't keep staring at people like that. I'm just looking. But Lady Calico, as the cat god, you possess great divine power. Now that you have learned to read, your might has increased. Mice are naturally timid and inherently afraid of cats. You might frighten them. Is being able to read really that impressive?" "Of course," the Taoist replied softly. "Just look at this world. Those who are impressive are usually the ones who can read." "You're right. Mice were naturally clever and numerous, with many becoming demons. Encountering them wasn't surprising. But the beings here were not limited to just that. After walking a few steps, they saw a tall figure approaching, leading a horse and covering their face with cloth. "How's your exploration?" "Pretty interesting." "Are you still exploring?" "Naturally." "Then let's go." "Are you selling well?" I'm selling at a loss, Heroine Wu replied, pulling out a few pieces of broken silver from her bosom, which looked to be about 10 taels. She called out to Lady Calico, and the little girl turned back, reaching out her hands to receive the money immediately. Hee, the woman couldn't help but grin. The Taoist didn't say anything. The fine-quality sword was quite complex in craftsmanship, and without considering additional value, a good one was worth at least several thousand Cayenne. If it was from Taoquin or Tangxi, as Heroine Wu called out, it would be even more expensive. Often, for a jianghu hero, their most valuable possession was their weapon. However, the weapons in the hands of those jianghu heroes usually showed some signs of use. They were not brand new. Coupled with certain issues and the urgency to sell, they naturally had to be priced lower. This time, the crowd was much larger. There were not only people, but also demons and ghosts. The amusing thing was that most of the people coming and going here were unwilling to reveal their true faces. Many wore cloaks with hoods, and the only visible part of their bodies was often obscured by a terrifying ghostly mask, pretending to look fearsome. In contrast, the actual demons and ghosts would try their best to disguise themselves as humans. How interesting. The Taoist held a lantern and did not cover his face. He also carried a half-person-long box slung over his shoulder and led an exceptionally beautiful little girl, which drew quite a bit of attention as they walked. The things sold here generally fall into a few categories, Heroine Wu explained as they walked. One type consists of ill-gotten gains, stolen, robbed, or obtained through deceit. Another type includes items that are prohibited or difficult to sell in the city, such as the blood of executed criminals or banned books from the court or sensitive information. And then there are items related to demons and spirits. Of course, within each category, there are both genuine and counterfeit items, so one must be discerning. The Taoist listened intently and observed carefully. However, after wandering around, he hadn't bought much. It felt more like a curious exploration. If he were to say he bought something, it would be just one item. He purchased 2 taels of herbs from a medicine seller. Seller claimed it was royal mangrass, explaining that it had 5 leaves, which formed a circle. The patterns on the circle resembled a human face. He said that where the grass grew, no other plants could survive, and if picked, it wouldn't wither for many days. The seller asserted that this grass absorbed all the spiritual qi of the surrounding environment and the essence of the sun and moon. Using it in alchemy or medicine could make one strong, youthful, and impervious to evil. In truth, he himself didn't even recognize it. Seeing this herb's miraculous properties, he decided to collect some, hoping to sell it to someone knowledgeable. When Xianxia asked him, he spun a tale. In reality, this grass was called ghostface grass, which only grew in places swarming with countless restless souls and wild ghosts. There were no soil for it to grow in a normal human realm. According to legend, there was once an unparalleled ghost king in the north who turned an entire city into ghosts. At that time, under the influence of ghostly and yin energies, all vegetation within a radius of several dozen li withered, and this grass sprouted everywhere. In such peaceful changing, how could there be any ghostface grass? Xianxia was only curious about its location, but the medicine seller was unwilling to disclose any information. In the end, the heroine resorted to threats and persuasion, and the Taoist explained the situation. The seller then finally agreed to tell the Taoist if the grass was bought. The Taoist ended up purchasing it, and the seller only mentioned a rough direction. It was in the Mount Yi area of Fengzhou, nearly 1,000 li south of Changchun. Fengzhou was known for its ginseng. He had come to collect ginseng before and happened upon this grass. This did surprise the Taoist a bit. If it were nearly 1,000 li north, it would be more acceptable. That region, though not yet at the border, was considered part of the north. It was said that after the war, most of the homes were deserted, with bandits rampant and demons often appearing. The south, however, was more peaceful and prosperous. What secrets could there be? Chapter 170, Ghostly Visit at Midnight. By the time they left that place, it was nearly 3 in the morning. Heroine Wu led the horse while holding a lantern, being quite vigilant. She frequently glanced left and right, fearing that hidden arrows might suddenly spring from the grass or that a nefarious individual might be following them from behind. However, they encountered no trouble until they returned to the village. Surprisingly, nothing happened. The woman seemed a bit taken aback. It's because you were vigilant. It's not just me being cautious. Something feels off today. What do you mean? When we were walking through the ghost market, I noticed several subtle gazes darting around me, my divine steed, you, and even behind you and on Lady Calico. They were hidden well, but I could see through it. Most likely, some surviving jianghu heroes from Mount Bacon spread word of our characteristics. Heroine Wu paused for a moment. She added, I initially thought they were coming to find us, but now I think it's more likely that news of those jianghu heroes' grim fates and deaths reached them, which made them hesitant to act. The Taoist, upon hearing this, was secretly worried. Then won't you face trouble when you leave the city in the future? Stop overthinking it. Heroine Wu reached the entrance of the thatched tavern, waved her hand dismissively, and casually explained, I rarely ride my horse when leaving the city, so they won't recognize me. Besides, I don't even take those small fries seriously. She paused for a moment. Furthermore, I don't go out of the city every day. Most of the time, I'm not alone when I do go out. No one would dare to trouble me, so you should focus on your own safety. Don't let a hidden arrow get you, and watch out for pickpockets. That's a relief. Only then did the Taoist feel reassured. Then the group of people had arrived at the entrance of the thatched tavern. The tavern was simple, with a wooden fence outside and a small courtyard inside. There's an adult. The little girl leaned closer to the fence, peering through the gaps to see inside. The Taoist and the woman looked over, but could only see a patch of darkness within. Even when they raised the lantern, it illuminated only a small area nearby. However, they soon heard footsteps approaching from inside. A dark figure quickly walked out, entering the dim light of the lantern to open the door for them. It was a female villager. You're back. Sorry for the trouble. It's no trouble. The group stepped into the courtyard, while the woman hurried to tie up the horse. Song Yu lived in the thatched hut on the left, with Heroine Wu next to him. There were only a few huts in this courtyard, but other horses had already been tied up by now, indicating that other guests had returned earlier than them. This woman was the mother of the brother and sister they had met during the day. They had a brief conversation over dinner that evening and learned that the men in their family were serving in the north, leaving the 3 women and an elder at home. The ghost market was filled with all kinds of people, including countless petty thieves. Whenever a guest brought a horse and stayed at an inn, the owner must keep watch all night. It was hard-earned money. Song Yu said nothing, returned to his room to wash up, and placed his paintings and belongings neatly before sitting cross-legged on the bed. Taking advantage of the still unfolding day and the recent arrival of the summer solstice, he continued to perceive the seasonal spiritual resonance. The cat transformed back into its original form and nestled beside him. The summer solstice brought forth intense and robust spiritual qi. Although Lady Calico was a demon, she also practiced the yin-yang method, allowing her to benefit from this energy. \\\\*. As the long night reached its halfway point, a ghost came to visit. This ghost appeared as a thin scholar, with a complexion as pale as paper. He was floating and walking halfway as he aimed at the few thatched taverns in the west of the village. Then he moved straight over to investigate them one by one. The first tavern consisted of several scattered thatched huts. The scholar ghost examined each one from left to right, but none of the residents caught his interest. The second tavern had a courtyard, enclosed by walls made of small stones. With a gentle push of his toes against the ground, he floated over the wall and into the courtyard, continuing his inspection. This tavern housed quite a few merchants, and judging by their bags, they seemed to carry a substantial amount of wealth. Though silver and gold were heavy for a ghost, his cultivation skill allowed him to manage it just fine. While the merchants all rested their bags beneath their heads or held them tightly in their arms, it wouldn't be difficult for him to extract them. However, today he had a more important target. The third tavern was still a rural hut converted into an inn, with a courtyard surrounded by a bamboo fence and a wooden gate. The scholar ghost didn't even need to jump. He simply walked over, squeezed his body through the gaps in the fence, and entered the courtyard. He continued to check each room one by one, murmuring softly to himself as he went. The first room housed a few jianghu heroes. 3 of them were sleeping together, their yang energy strong and their blood and life force robust. Ordinary ghosts would likely not dare to approach them. Oh my, 3 people sharing a room, the scholar ghost muttered, moving on to the second room. Oh my, such weak yang energy here. Oh, at such an age, if luck is on your side in a couple of years, you might be able to come find me in the netherworld soon. With a grin, he headed toward the third room. The scholar ghost pressed close to the wall, peering through the window with one eye. This time he was a bit surprised. Inside the room lay a woman whose blood and life force were even stronger than that of the 3 robust jianghu heroes in the first room combined, likely a top-notch jianghu hero. Ghosts generally weren't afraid of ordinary jianghu heroes, and those with cultivation skills like his own would have even less reason to fear. However, this woman's life force was exceptionally intense, and today happened to be the summer solstice. The scholar ghost didn't dare provoke her and quickly withdrew his gaze, shutting his mouth and moving away. It wasn't that he was afraid of losing. It was mainly because jianghu heroes were sharp and perceptive. He worried that if he stared too long, he might wake her, which would jeopardize his theft of treasures. Arriving at the fourth room, he leaned in closer to the window. Inside was a Taoist priest sitting cross-legged. It was hard to tell if he was asleep or not. A cat nestled beside him, its ears perked up, also uncertain if it was awake. In any case, the room was quiet. His gaze shifted, and he spotted a bag and a long, oilcloth-wrapped box resting on the bed. It was that box. The scholar ghost inhaled sharply. In truth, he didn't know what was inside that box either. He had merely been a habitual thief in life and had died because of his stealing. Perhaps it was due to his obsession with theft that he became a ghost. Regardless, after transforming into a ghost, he continued to have a strong affinity for stealing and gradually evolved significant skills. For instance, he could tell the value of any treasure with just a glance. Even when walking at night, not even the most perceptive dog could detect his presence. Sometimes, he could pass by the statues in temples without issue. When he was wandering in the ghost market tonight to search for a target, he saw the Taoist priest carrying the long box and felt that it contained boundless Tao essence and profound mysteries, leaving him utterly astonished. Afterward, he inquired and learned some information from the jianghu heroes in the area, filling him with both fear and excitement. Ultimately, excitement overwhelmed his fear, prompting him to follow the priest. He kept his distance, watching as they settled here, patiently biding his time until this moment. Now, with the person in deep sleep, even if that person was a high-level cultivator, he felt he had a chance. The remaining factor was the thrill. What a thrill indeed. This thrill was truly a long-lost sensation. The scholar ghost kept one eye open, peering at the door for a while. He sensed something unusual but couldn't pinpoint the reason. However, seeing that neither the Taoist nor the cat stirred, time slipped by and dawn approached. He didn't dare delay any longer, gritted his teeth and made up his mind. Silently, the entire ghost transformed into a wisp of blue smoke and slipped directly through the window. Swish! The curled-up Calico cat instantly raised its head, staring directly at the wisp of blue smoke. The smoke landed on the ground and transformed into human form. It was only after the scholar ghost slipped inside that he realized what was wrong. The yang energy in this room was astonishingly dense. It was even stronger than it had been at midday, yet none of it had leaked outside. The entire room was filled with pure, unyielding spiritual qi. For wandering spirits and ghosts, this was nothing short of a living hell. Entering it was akin to a normal person walking into a furnace. The scholar ghost's face contorted with pain, his entire body curling up as he desperately wanted to cry out, but didn't dare make a sound. Looking ahead, he met the gaze of the Calico cat. The cat's eyes reflected the night, making them appear terrifying. Damn it! The scholar ghost cursed inwardly and turned to flee, only to find that he couldn't move. Glancing again, he saw that the Taoist had also opened his eyes. Those eyes were calm and unwavering. Whoosh! The oil lamp in the room flared to life, casting its glow throughout the space. In this yang energy-filled room, the scholar ghost felt as if he were experiencing the same agony he had felt when he first became a ghost and naively wandered into the scorching sun. It was even more excruciating now. But he couldn't move, so he was forced to steel himself and look toward the Taoist in front of him, almost gritting his teeth as he said, "Immortal master, spare me." The Taoist hadn't spoken yet, but the Calico cat beside him stood up. It shook its head and stared at the ghost curiously before speaking in human language. "What are you doing in our house? Are you trying to steal our money?" "I didn't intend to offend you." "I didn't intend to offend you," the cat mimicked. The scholar ghost was in extreme agony, and to make matters worse, the Calico cat was mocking him by mimicking his tone. He was both pained and furious. The Taoist patted the cat's tail before finally looking at the ghost and speaking. "For what purpose have you come here?" "I was merely passing by." The Taoist listened, then pressed his lips together and turned to the cat beside him, saying, "Lady Calico, he's lying to us." Lady Calico's expression instantly turned serious. It exchanged a glance with the Taoist to confirm, then turned back with a more menacing look. It took a deep breath and exhaled toward the ghost. Whoosh! Its breath turned into flames. Ah! Even though it was just a slight burn, the ghost yelped in pain. "Lady Calico, your cultivation has reached a point where even your breath carries spirituality," the Taoist praised before turning back to the ghost, asking again, "Now, can you tell me why you're here?" "Immortal master, spare me." The ghost finally gritted his teeth through the pain and said, "I often frequent the ghost market, and tonight I saw your pack brimming with spiritual resonance, so I thought to steal it." After speaking, he hurriedly added, "Please, immortal master, have mercy on me. It's my first offense." Lady Calico's eyes narrowed at once. So, he really did come to steal something. How was that any different from a rat? However, just as Lady Calico was about to get angrier, a look of confusion crossed its face. It stared at the scholar ghost, tilting its head. Why do you talk to yourself when you steal? So, it was because of his talking that it had caught him. The scholar ghost's face twisted with regret, shame, and embarrassment before he gritted his teeth and explained. It's a habit from when I was alive. After becoming a ghost, I just can't seem to stop muttering to myself while I steal. Oh, that's quite peculiar. Please, immortal master and cat immortal, spare me. The words, cat immortal, made Lady Calico feel very pleased. Though it was in a good mood, she remained silent, simply turning to look at the Taoist. The Taoist priest remained seated cross-legged on the bed, calmly looking at him. It sounds like this isn't your first offense. Even his tone was remarkably calm. The scholar ghost was immediately startled, his entire body trembling. He realized that he had slipped up in his words. It wasn't because he was foolish, but the yang energy in the room was burning like fire. His body was rapidly shrinking, and it took all his energy just to endure the pain. He had no capacity left to focus on anything else. At this moment, he could only stammer, "But it's my first offense against you, immortal master." "I see. Please, immortal master, spare my life." The scholar ghost's form continued to shrink rapidly. At this rate, he would likely dissolve completely in less than a moment, like snow under the noon sun. Seeing this, the scholar ghost dared not harbor any further tricks and pleaded for mercy with all his might. "Spare me, immortal master." "Don't worry," the Taoist priest said, simply waving his sleeve. Instantly, all the solstice spiritual energy and yang energy in the room dissipated. The scholar ghost heaved a sigh of relief. Not only was he no longer suffering from the excruciating burn as if being roasted by flames, but it was also the early hours of the morning, when yin qi was at its peak and yang energy was at its weakest. The world was shrouded in darkness. Once the room returned to its normal state, it felt as though he had been moved from a blazing kiln to the cool and pleasant atmosphere of spring or autumn. He couldn't help but let out a groan, akin to a fish about to die from being exposed to the sun, suddenly returned to the comfort of water. His body could now move again. However, in front of this Taoist priest, how could he dare to move? How could he dare to run? Theft is not a crime punishable by death. I observe that your body is filled with thick, pure yin qi. While your cultivation is not low, it doesn't seem like you've harmed anyone. Moreover, becoming a ghost is not easy, and I wouldn't take your life merely for theft. Immortal master, you're right. I just have a habit of stealing. I loved stealing while alive, and I still love it after death, but I have never intended to harm anyone. Be that as it may, stealing is still wrong. If you hadn't stolen from me, I might have let it pass. But since you've come to steal from me, I'll consider it a fated encounter. The Taoist priest calmly gazed at the minor ghost before him. If you were alive, the laws of earth would govern you. As a ghost, you fall under the jurisdiction of the earth gods of the heavenly palace. I could send you to the nearest Taoist temple. What do you think? Spare me, immortal master, spare me. The scholar ghost immediately kowtowed frantically. What's the matter? Immortal master, you may not know this, but while demons and ghosts are indeed under the heavenly palace authority, human souls are meant to dissipate into the heavens and earth after death. Therefore, the heavenly palace is most severe with us yin ghosts. If you send me to the heavenly palace, it's the same as sentencing me to death. The scholar ghost paused before continuing. Moreover, there are now ghost hunters everywhere. Though their skills may not be high, I've heard that many minor ghosts have been captured by them. If you send me to the nearest Taoist temple, I fear I might not make it to the heavenly palace. Oh, Songyu became somewhat intrigued and asked, you mentioned that there are ghost hunters everywhere. What's that about? I don't really know the reason, the scholar ghost replied truthfully. In recent years, it's become common to see Taoist priests roaming the land. When they come across minor ghosts, they capture them. If they encounter great ghosts, especially those that have caused trouble, they'll try to capture them as well. The ghost continued. Even those that haven't caused trouble, some of them have managed to escape capture, or so I've heard. As for me, I've never harmed anyone and possess some skill in hiding my presence, which is how I've managed to remain free up until now. The Taoist priest, still sitting cross-legged on the bed, lowered his eyelids slightly. After some thought, he asked again, do you know why they're capturing ghosts, and what do they do with them afterward? The scholar ghost hesitated. He wanted to give an answer but couldn't, so he finally said, I'm not sure about that, but whatever it is, it can't be good. What do you think I should do then? Dare I ask, what do you mean by what should you do, immortal master? What should I do with you? You want my opinion. Speak your mind. The scholar ghost gritted his teeth. Please, immortal master, give me a punishment. Even if it means burning away most of my cultivation skills with yang energy, I only beg to be spared my life. I would be eternally grateful. And will you continue to steal after this? No, I wouldn't dare. You hesitated. Please, immortal master, spare me. I swear I won't steal again. The Taoist priest, growing curious, asked sincerely, I've heard that you died because of theft. Why is it that, even after death, you haven't learned your lesson and continue to steal? The scholar ghost hesitated once more. The scholar ghost, being quick-witted, understood that a good answer might help him escape this predicament. So, after hesitating for a long while, he suddenly knelt down on the ground and sincerely said, Immortal master, you may not know this, but after a person turns into a ghost, although it may seem like we gain a longer life, much longer than in the Yang world, it's not the same as being alive. Please rise and speak. I dare not. Please get up. Only then did the scholar ghost stand. The Taoist priest said, I'm willing to hear your thoughts. I wouldn't call it an insight, just speaking from my own experience. Very well. When one is alive, eating, drinking, and even the basic necessities of life seem normal. Standing under the sun might feel too hot, but you're still alive. Although people fear death, they still live on. Even with the constant illnesses and misfortunes, there are other comforts, the scholar ghost said, sneaking glances at the Taoist priest's expression. But after becoming a ghost, no matter how delicious the food may be, it has no taste. No matter how fine the wine or celestial tea, you can't drink it. When you're hungry, all you can eat is dew. In the first few years after I died, my family would still burn incense for me every year. The scent of that incense was pleasant, but eventually they stopped, and I had to resort to stealing others' incense during festivals. But the incense from others, it's never as satisfying. I can't bask in the sun, so I can only wander at night. Not everyone turns into a ghost after they die, so no matter how far you roam at night, whether within 10 li or 100, you might not even meet another ghost to talk to. It's a lifetime of loneliness. How else could I find joy? The Taoist priest, expressionless, only nodded. He was already somewhat aware of these things. Long ago, when he had studied at Hidden Dragon Temple, he had read about it in books. Though the written descriptions in books were detailed, experience gained this way always felt superficial compared to seeing and hearing it firsthand. That was why his conversation with a minor ghost in the mountains of Pingzhu had left such a deep impression on him. Later, outside Changing City in Yanhui Peaks, there was an old ghost of several hundred years. The murals and writings on the walls spoke of how it had become lost in loneliness. Seeing a chance, the scholar ghost quickly continued. Moreover, after becoming a ghost, it may seem like you've already died once and won't die again, but that's not true. There's still the danger of the soul being utterly destroyed. While alive, if you get sick or break a leg, you can see a doctor and take medicine. If you're beaten, injured, bullied, or even killed, there's the authorities, the government to appeal to. But as a ghost, if something goes wrong, how do you get treated? Who can help you? If a ghost gets beaten, hurt, bullied, or caught by a passing Taoist or monk, or even struck by a passing deity and the soul is scattered, who will care? Where can you seek justice? Go on. I was originally a human, but now feared by people. How could I feel good about that? That makes sense. You can't taste food nor see the light. Most of my human joys are mostly lost. There's nowhere to depend on, no gods to rely on. I'm just drifting around aimlessly night after night and year after year. How could I live like that? At first, the scholar ghost was merely trying to find an excuse to plead for his life, but as he spoke, he became truly emotional. His expression grew complex and pained, almost on the verge of tears. Yet, as a ghost, even crying wasn't possible. I don't even know how I foolishly became a ghost after dying. When I first turned into a ghost, I even felt a bit lucky. But less than half a month later, I was filled with regret. Had I known it would come to this, I would have rather died fully and been done with it. As he said this, he paused, realizing that he had misspoken. He quickly raised his head to look at the Taoist priest and the cat, who was listening in confusion, and explained, But I'm too much of a coward. Even now, I wouldn't dare seek death. The Taoist priest could read his mind and only nodded with a smile, saying, All creatures have the will to survive. Immortal master, you're wise. The scholar ghost quickly flattered, then lifted his head and sneakily glanced at the Taoist. I've said all I needed to say. I wonder if you would be willing to let me off this time. I promise to turn over a new leaf. I'll never steal again. I'm afraid that won't do. Then please punish me. You're quite the clever one. You flatter me, immortal master. I can consider not sending you to a temple or monastery. Immortal Master, please tell me what I need to do. I need you to do me a favor. Please, go on. Have you ever heard of Mount Yi in Fengzhou? I've heard of Fengzhou, but not Mount Yi. I've heard that there are many ghosts there. There are quite a few ghosts. The scholar ghost lifted his eyes and stole a glance at the Taoist priest. Only after their gazes met did he speak. I did hear something a couple of years ago. Some nearby ghosts went to Fengzhou for a visit. When they returned, they said they saw a procession of 100 ghosts in Fengzhou, all of them newly dead, being led by an old ghost. They didn't know where they were going. Is that so? The Taoist priest's interest was piqued. I wouldn't dare lie to you, Immortal Master. To be honest with you, the Taoist said, I'm quite curious about this matter. However, Fengzhou is quite far, and it's not convenient for me to go there at the moment. You have great cultivation skills, and you're skilled at traveling by night. Plus, you possess the power to conceal your movements. If you would be willing to go to Mount Yi in Fengzhou to investigate on my behalf, I would be deeply grateful. The scholar ghost lowered his head, his eyes darting around as he thought. Though Fengzhou was adjacent to Anzhou, where Changjing was located, it was still quite a distance away. If he could leave, he would be returning to comfortable territories, like a fish returning to the vast ocean or a bird soaring in the high skies. Unless this Taoist had divine abilities, it would be hard for him to catch him again. However, this Taoist really did seem to possess divine abilities, and since he dared to let him go, he likely had the means to deal with him if needed. The scholar ghost stared at the ground, his eyes darting around as he thought. After a moment of hesitation, he looked up and asked, So, if I go on this errand for you, Immortal Master, will you let me go? No, came the reply. Huh? Your theft was wrong, and you deserve punishment. However, if you sincerely repent and help me with this task, I will certainly forgive you, the Taoist calmly said while looking at him. But this journey to Fengzhou is not only far, spanning thousands of li, but also potentially dangerous. If you agree to go, I must reward you accordingly. The task cannot simply offset your punishment. The scholar ghost looked up at him, momentarily stunned. Then the Taoist added, If you can complete this investigation for me and return to Changjing, I'll treat you to a cup of tea. A cup of tea? Yes, a cup of tea. The scholar ghost stood frozen for a long while before finally lowering his head, his tone noticeably different from before. May I ask where exactly Mount Yi is located in Fengzhou? And how should I find it? Once I've found it, how do I return to find you, Immortal Master? Mount Yi is to the south of Fengzhou in Zai Commandery of Yunnan County. On the mountain grows a plant called ghostface grass, which looks like this. The Taoist showed him the ghostface grass. Wherever this plant grows, there will be many ghosts. Understood. My name is Song Yu, and I live in the western part of Changjing City on Willow Street, about midway down. There's a flag at the entrance with the character for Dao and a sign that reads Rodent Extermination. You can find me there. In Changjing City. What's the problem? If it were half a year ago, even with the heavy yang energy in the city, it wouldn't have been much trouble for me to make a trip inside. But recently, I've heard that the city god of Changjing has gone mad, patrolling every day, hunting demons and ghosts. Though I possess some skill in concealing my whereabouts, the city god is particularly adept at finding and summoning spirits. The scholar ghost appeared troubled. Moreover, I've stolen things in the city before, so I'm rather hesitant to return. My name is Song Yu, the Taoist repeated. If you are stopped by the martial officers of the city god's temple, just give them my name, and you should be able to get out of trouble. The scholar ghost was startled once more, quickly bowing in panic. I understand. Thank you in advance for your help. Don't mention it. Please take care of yourself and proceed cautiously. If you encounter any danger, prioritize your own safety. Farewell. The Taoist bowed to him, and the scholar ghost bowed in return. Moments later, the scholar ghost transformed into a wisp of green smoke, slipping through a hole in the window and vanishing into the night. The Taoist glanced outside. The world beyond was still shrouded in darkness, though dawn was approaching. He gently stroked the cat beside him. Instead of continuing to meditate, he lay down, a few thoughts lingering in his mind. Slowly, with his eyes closed, he drifted into sleep. The Calico cat curled back into a ball, covering its head with its paws, and squinted its eyes to return to its slumber. Then, the oil lamp in the room flickered out. Cock-a-doodle-doo. With the rooster's crow, the day began to break. The Calico cat was the first to raise its head. The sky outside had turned a deep blue. As the rooster crowed a few more times, the cat rubbed its eyes. Unable to contain its curiosity, it leaped onto the window, staring out. The day grew brighter, but the sky remained dim and cloudy. It had started to rain outside. Perhaps because the Taoist had returned late the previous night and cultivated until midnight. He hadn't gotten enough rest and ended up sleeping well into the day. What time is it? Hem. What time is it, Lady Calico? It's daytime. The Taoist shook his head and let it go. Sitting up in bed, he wiped his face and straightened his clothes. Getting out of bed, he put on his shoes and walked outside. All he could hear was the sound of rain, a gentle and steady patter. When he opened the door, he saw that the rain was coming down quite heavily. His steps came to a halt at the entrance. He could only take one more step forward, any more and he would step beyond the shelter of the thatched roof. The ground had already become thoroughly soaked, and water kept splashing over. The dirt at the doorway had turned into wet mud. The Taoist looked up at the sky, thinking that the rain probably wouldn't last much longer. There were several jianghu between where he stood and the main hall. After a brief moment of hesitation, he turned back and strapped on his bundle. He then took the long box in one hand and scooped up the groggy cat in the other before he locked the door and made his way across the courtyard. Stepping on the stone slabs, he quickly crossed the yard and reached the main hall. Inside, there was only one person eating. It was none other than Heroine Wu. She held a bowl in her hands and glanced back at him, then called out to the innkeeper, "Your other guest is awake. Could you bring another bowl of porridge, please?" Coming right up. Song Yu nodded to her and sat down at the same table. The innkeeper soon arrived with their meal. A bowl of wild vegetable porridge, a boiled egg, and a spoonful of pickles on top. This was the simple breakfast offered by the inn. "Take your time. If the porridge or pickles aren't enough, just let me know, and I'll bring more," the innkeeper said. "Thank you," the Taoist softly replied and took the egg. He tapped it on the table to crack it and began peeling it slowly. Ar-ar-ar-ar-ar-ar. A soft rolling sound came from the table. Looking up, he saw the other boiled egg rolling over toward him. The Taoist raised his gaze to glance at the woman across from him. She simply nodded toward the calico cat with her chin. "Thank you," the Taoist said once more. The woman remained silent, holding the bottom of her bowl in one hand while using chopsticks to shovel food with the other. Her eyes were fixed on the rain outside. Once the innkeeper had walked away, she finally spoke. "What was that noise coming from your room last night?" "A minor ghost came by, trying to steal Master Du's painting, but I caught him in the act," the Taoist replied, still peeling his egg. "I had a good talk with him. I asked him for a favor and then let him go." "Ah," Heroine Wu didn't probe further and continued to stare out the window. "This rain is really annoying." After finishing peeling the egg, the Taoist took a delicate blue and white porcelain bowl from his bundle. He broke the egg into small pieces, placed them in the bowl, and handed it to Lady Calico. Then he picked up his chopsticks and quietly prepared to eat. "Summer rain is always like this," he added softly. "When do you think it will stop?" "It'll stop before noon." "You always say you can't predict the future." "I'm just speaking from experience." "If it stops by noon," Heroine Wu thought for a moment, smacking her lips. "That should be fine. We can stay here until noon, or if the sun comes out, we'll wait until the road dries and leave in the afternoon. Since we're not far from the city, we should still be able to reach Changing before dark. There won't be any other guests coming today anyway." "Yes," the Taoist agreed, contentedly eating his meal. The woman stopped talking and ate in large bites. After finishing her first bowl, she called the innkeeper for a second. Once they were done eating, they rested there. The innkeeper didn't rush them. As Heroine Wu had mentioned, the inn only saw guests on the nights when the ghost market opened, and the next one wasn't for another 2 days. There was no business to be had today. Later in the morning, the woman who had kept watch all night went to rest, while the young siblings woke up. They sat by the doorway, holding bowls of food, their gazes unfocused as they looked out at the rain. They seemed unaware of how much farm work awaited them today. Though the siblings were still young, they were quite outgoing and occasionally exchanged a few words with Heroine Wu. By noon, just as predicted, the rain stopped. Summer rains were unpredictable, and today was no exception. As soon as the rain ended, the skies cleared, much like they had 2 days before. Sunlight broke through, dazzling and bright. Except for the muddy ground, everything else was clean and fresh. The 2 children of the inn, now excited, went outside barefoot. They stomped through the mud, running back and forth. They climbed onto piles of firewood and tree branches, looking around from higher vantage points. The Taoist and the woman had just come out of the courtyard, ready to return to the city. Seeing the children's behavior, Heroine Wu couldn't help but ask while sitting on horseback, "Kids, what are you looking for?" The siblings were startled at first, but upon recognizing the heroine who had told them stories the night before, they relaxed and answered, "We're looking for a rainbow." "A rainbow? Where's the rainbow?" "We're still searching. It always appears after the rain." "Have you found it yet?" "No, not yet." The woman on the horse straightened her back and craned her neck to look around, but she found nothing. It could be that the southwestern horse was too short. Even though she was tall, sitting on the horse didn't help much. Her view was obstructed by the surrounding thatched cottages, preventing her from seeing far. As she withdrew her gaze, she met the dark, glossy eyes of the siblings. "Did you find it, heroine?" "No, I didn't. Isn't there one today?" "It's not that every summer rain brings a rainbow. Sometimes there isn't one at all," Heroine Wu replied, pausing to observe their expressions. "It's also possible that I just didn't see it. You can keep looking." "Oh, but I have a Taoist beside me who is quite skilled. I don't know if he can tell fortunes, but you might ask him." "Huh?" Upon hearing this, the siblings immediately turned to the Taoist. "Taoist elder, can you tell fortunes?" "Sorry to disappoint you both." The Taoist shook his head with a wry smile. "I don't know anything about fortune-telling, nor do I have any idea where a rainbow might appear." "Oh," the siblings' faces immediately showed a look of disappointment again. The Taoist looked at them, thought for a moment, and said, "However, I do know a method that can help find a rainbow." "What method?" "Please bring me a bowl of water." The siblings exchanged glances, and then looked at the Taoist. Immediately, the sister took off running toward the house. Before long, she returned with a bowl of water. "Is this okay?" "Very good." The Taoist stood next to the horse, casually took the bowl of water, and walked into a spot where the sunlight shone directly. He found the right angle, and under the watchful eyes of everyone, bowed his head to take a sip before spraying the water out. A fine mist of water sprayed out from his mouth. Immediately, a ray of rainbow light appeared in the sunlight. The siblings were astonished. As they watched the visible mist dance and fall, a short, curved rainbow hung in the air. They both found it incredibly magical. "Is this magic?" "No." "Then is it a trick?" "It can be called a trick, but it's not exactly that either." As the mist settled to the ground, the rainbow gradually faded and disappeared. The Taoist handed the bowl back to them, smiling as he said to the siblings, "You can try too, just follow my example. As long as the water you spray is fine and plentiful enough, you'll be able to see a rainbow." "We can do it too." "Of course." The sister, still skeptical, took a sip from the bowl. It made her cheeks puff up, and her mouth became small and moist, rosy red. After taking a deep breath, she opened her mouth to spray out the water. "Why didn't it work?" "Try again." "I did it." The two children immediately burst into joy. Not only them, but even the grown woman beside them found it amusing. The children began to play, taking turns. Sometimes they succeeded, and other times they didn't, spraying out little rainbows that would disappear moments later. Before long, the bowl of water was empty. Seeing this, the siblings finally reacted. The sister quickly turned around, bowing repeatedly to the Taoist beside her. "Thank you, Taoist elder." The brother immediately followed suit and bowed. "Thank you, Taoist elder." The woman sitting on the horse raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you going to thank me?" "Thank you, heroine." "Are you happy now?" "Yes, of course." "Me too." "What a pity it's fake," the brother said with a hint of regret. Hearing this, the Taoist turned to the little boy and asked, "Why do you say this rainbow is fake?" "Because a real one is bigger, lasts longer, and hangs in the sky," the boy replied. "My mother said we can make wishes on it, just like with shooting stars. Every time we make a wish, my father will come back." "I see," the Taoist nodded, smiling. The sister, being more considerate than her brother, worried the Taoist might feel upset. So she quickly added, "But we're still grateful, Taoist elder." "You're welcome." The Taoist withdrew his gaze and didn't say anything else. He simply stepped forward. The siblings stood by the wall watching them, and the sister's voice rang out, "Taoist elder heroine, please take care. If you come again, stay at our home." "Sure. Thank you." The heroine on horseback, and the Taoist slowly walked away. The siblings, holding their empty bowls and about to head home, suddenly heard the Taoist's voice from afar. "Please look behind you." Upon hearing this, the siblings quickly turned around, and a rainbow stretched across the sky. "I've been delayed for 4.5 days. I can imagine there's a pile of things waiting for me to do. I need to hurry back to the city, so I won't accompany you any longer, Taoist," said Heroine Wu. "Even if we traveled together, we would have to part ways once we enter the city. Feel free to go about your business, Heroine." "All right. Take care." "Hiya," Heroine Wu called out. Without her urging the horse, the yellow-maned horse took off on its own, splashing mud with its hooves. Although the horse was short, it ran quickly, actually trotting along. Her figure quickly disappeared on the main road ahead. Songyu withdrew his gaze. This heroine had brought him out for a journey that delayed them for 4.5 days. Not only did she fail to find Dr. Kai, whom she was looking for, but she also got caught up in the conflicts of the jianghu. He wondered if those who wanted to steal the painting had remembered her, and whether they would come looking for trouble. In any case, he felt somewhat guilty. Thinking too much was useless, so he decided to stop. The Taoist continued to stroll leisurely along the roadside. The girl beside him seemed completely carefree. Having found a stick from somewhere, she was swishing it and striking the heads of the weeds by the road, making sounds as she did. Whenever a dragonfly or butterfly fluttered by, she would jump up to catch it, often splashing mud when she landed back on the ground. The capital city, Xianxia, was gradually coming into view. Suddenly, a chaotic and heavy sound of hooves approached from behind. Hiya. Turning around, he saw several tall horses galloping toward them, with armored soldiers riding on them. Before they got close, they shouted repeatedly, "Get out of the way, move to the side." The Taoist quickly grabbed the girl's wrist and pulled her to his side, watching as the group of soldiers on horseback galloped past. Following their command, he stepped aside into the dirt by the roadside. Then he turned to look in the direction the soldiers had come from. A large troop was slowly approaching. At the forefront were 3 tall horses. Among them, the first 2 horses stood out. One was pure white and flawless like a white jade, with not a single strand of mixed fur. The other was pitch black, its body gleaming like black satin, resembling a dark, majestic steed. Riding these horses were 2 remarkable young men, both seemingly under 20 years old, dressed in hunting attire with an outstanding demeanor. These 2 horses were already imposing and rare divine steeds, but slightly behind them, a horse even taller emerged. It was a striking black and white mix, with an extraordinary presence. The rider wore a red robe that bulged beneath, giving an impression of great strength. Astonishingly, he was even wearing armor in this scorching heat. The Taoist recognized both the horse and the person. The 3 men engaged in lively conversation, though most of the time it was the 2 young men who spoke. One was exuberantly chatty, while the other was cultured and gentle. The general beside them remained mostly silent, only offering a few subdued responses when they addressed him, seeming rather disinterested. Behind them trailed a number of attendants and soldiers. The most eye-catching sight was a cart loaded with game, including deer, rabbits, goats, wolves, and leopards. As this procession drew nearer, the general habitually surveyed the surroundings. With a casual glance, he spotted the Taoist by the roadside and couldn't help but fix his gaze on him, no longer responding to the 2 distinguished young men. The group continued until they reached the Taoist's side. The general merely lifted the reins lightly. There was no need to tug hard or make a sound, as the horse seemed to understand and came to a halt. Whoa! Only then did the sounds of halting echo beside and behind him. The entire procession came to a stop. The general paused on his horse. He turned slightly and cupped his hands in greeting, speaking calmly to the Taoist by the roadside. "Sir, it's good to see you again." The Taoist immediately returned the gesture with a bow. "Greetings, General Chen." The 2 young men observed the exchange, each with their own thoughts. The older man squinted slightly, as if he had suddenly understood who the Taoist was and why General Chen was acquainted with him. The younger man, however, wore a puzzled expression. Yet he maintained a gentle demeanor. His smile was like a spring breeze as he asked the general beside him, "General, have you encountered an old acquaintance?" "Yes, Your Highness, it's an old acquaintance," the general answered calmly, then turned back to the Taoist. "May I ask where you've come from, sir?" "I just took a stroll outside the mountain." "Are you heading back to the city?" "Indeed. It has just rained, and the roads are muddy. It must be fate that we meet here. I wonder if I may have the honor of inviting you to accompany me, sir." As General Chen spoke, he glanced back. Immediately, one of the soldiers dismounted and treaded through the mud, holding the reins as he approached the Taoist. The Taoist looked down at his own feet and shook his head in refusal. "Thank you for your kind offer, General. However, my shoes are already dirty, so it doesn't matter. Though I am returning to the city, I am not in a hurry." "So you're in the mood to take a walk, sir?" "It's not that I'm in the mood to take a walk. It's simply that I have traveled too far along the way. The capital is so close now that this little distance hardly matters." The people beside them exchanged glances, surprised. They had not expected that a renowned figure like General Chen Zi, who commanded great military power, would be so courteous in his invitation, yet still have someone dare to refuse. The general nodded thoughtfully, then turned to the people beside him, cupping his hands in a salute. "Your Highnesses, the capital is just ahead. I have the good fortune to meet an old acquaintance today, so I invite you both to return to the city first, allowing me to chat with my acquaintance and catch up." Of course, of course." The older man quickly responded. The younger man wanted to say something more, but upon hearing this, decided against it, and instead looked curiously at the Taoist standing by the roadside with the little girl. The main group continued forward, leaving General Chen and the two personal soldiers standing in place. Sir, you truly won't ride a horse. Thank you for your kind offer. I can spare a horse for the child beside you. General Chen looked at the little girl beside the Taoist. We have a horse. The little girl looked up and made eye contact with him. That's fine. The general, without hesitation, dismounted. He led the horse closer to the Taoist and smiled as he bowed again. During our previous meeting in the palace, I had hoped to talk more with you, but I couldn't fully enjoy the conversation. I didn't expect that on my return from the hunt, we would meet by the roadside. It truly is fate. General, you are. I'm accompanying their highnesses out of the city for the hunt. The general glanced at the group gradually moving away and added, at His Majesty's command. Then you will have some questions to answer upon return. I'll just speak the truth. Why are you wearing heavy armor for the hunt outside the city? There are many fierce beasts like tigers and bears outside the city, and occasionally even spirits that have turned into demons. To ensure the safety of their highnesses, I must wear armor. Now I understand. Song Yu smiled and didn't ask further. As the main group moved further away, the soldiers guarding the rear also departed. The Taoist resumed walking along the official road, now accompanied by a general and two personal soldiers, all fully armored and leading their horses. In recent days, there have been many rumors about the Grand Commander's mansion in the city. Some common folk even say that a divine immortal has descended to punish treacherous officials and bullies. General Chen laughed. As he walked alongside the Taoist, his towering figure was highlighted, especially with the heavy armor beneath his robe. He added, the high-ranking officials know more about it. I can't count how many people have come looking for you these days, but who would have thought that you venture outside the city to seek out a master? They must have all found the doors closed. Do the common folk know it was my doing? Most do not. That's good. It seems you prefer peace and quiet. Taoists generally do. True enough. How did you come to know I was leaving the city to seek a master? The Taoist asked with a smile. In the palace before, you inquired of the state preceptor about the masters in the capital. You travel the world, so naturally, you have a desire to seek them out, General Chen replied leisurely. He continued, moreover, we encountered a group of ruffians armed with knives and clubs on the road this morning, who were quite a sight to behold. They were stopped by the military academy for questioning, and I heard a story about a divine immortal, which led me to believe you were off to find the snake immortal of Mount Bacon. I see. You truly have skill. It's all thanks to the snake immortal, the Taoist said honestly. But I wasn't seeking the snake immortal, I was looking for Dr. Kai. They both reside on Mount Bacon, but one is on the outskirts while the other is deeper inside. I didn't expect to miss seeing Dr. Kai and instead encounter the snake immortal. Well, that too is fate. General Chen glanced at the long box on the Taoist's back. Neither mentioned the Du family's painting. There was no need to dwell on it now. Such was the nature of the world. This painting was indeed precious and could cause many in the jianghu to risk their lives for it, but it also depended on where it was placed. If it fell into the hands of the jianghu, it could become a source of bloodshed. If kept in the treasury of a high-ranking official, it could spark a struggle for power. But if hung in the imperial palace, it would become a topic of great interest for the world. Though General Chen had not seen the Taoist's abilities, he could roughly guess a thing or two. In his presence, no one could take it away. I travel the world, and there are still many places I have not visited. May I ask you for some guidance, General? I will share all I know without reservation. I've heard that after the Northern Wars, the borderlands are nearly empty, with 1,000 li void of roosters crowing, the Taoist asked as they walked. Is that true? Yes. The answer was brief, devoid of any emotion, like a single word from a historical text. When the general gave this response, there was not a flicker of expression on his face. After speaking that word and pausing in silence for a moment, he took a few steps forward and began to sketch the grim situation at the border. The struggles among the nation's clans are the most brutal. Whenever the northern barbarians reach our lands, they swarm like locusts, leaving not a single one behind. This has been the case for centuries. What about us? It's the same. I've heard there are many demons causing havoc in the north. That's no mere rumor, the general replied as they walked. You are a master, so you must know that when a place becomes deserted, it belongs to the demons. And when many people die in a place, the demons there grow even more rampant, as terrifying as a plague. Are there divine beings in the north to subdue them? I am but a border commander of Great Yan, focused solely on fighting the barbarians outside our borders and seldom concerned with demons. The general paused briefly. However, I often hear rumors from the rear of divine officers descending and battling demons at night. I see. The two continued to walk and talk. The Taoist had long heard the stories of this general, having listened to them countless times, so how could he not want to engage in conversation? Moreover, he had matters regarding the north he wished to inquire about. Unfortunately, their last encounter had been in the palace, where the current emperor was the main focus. Thus, the two of them couldn't talk much to each other. Now was a perfect opportunity. The general also had things he wanted to probe about him. Thus, their steps slowed down more than usual as they engaged in conversation. This allowed the Taoist to experience the customs and culture of the north while also getting to know this general, destined to be remembered through the ages. The capital was drawing ever closer. We're almost in the city. Do you have any matters to attend to, General Chen? I should go pursue the two princes. This is a matter of great importance. I wouldn't dare delay you, General. General Chen chuckled, mounted his horse, and sat atop it. Yet he looked back at the Taoist, not in a hurry to leave. I seem to have forgotten something. Please, General, go on. Previously, during the Great War in the North, it was largely thanks to the state preceptor's remarkable foresight that Great Yan could achieve such an easy victory. I am indeed very curious about the art of divination and fortune-telling. General Chen lowered his gaze to scrutinize him. He asked, since you are a Taoist master highly esteemed by the state preceptor, I wonder if you are also knowledgeable in the ways of fortune-telling. I'm afraid I must disappoint you. I do not understand that art. Are you speaking the truth? Please don't deceive me. I've asked you many questions, General, and you have always spoken openly and thoroughly. I am truly grateful for that. Now that you have a question to ask, how could I possibly deceive or hide anything? The general looked down, while the Taoist looked up. They exchanged a sincere glance, with everything unspoken between them. Thank you, sir. You are too kind, General. May I inquire if I can visit you next time? Of course. Then I'll take my leave. Hiya. The spotted beast immediately took off at lightning speed. The two accompanying guards rode after him. 3 figures swiftly disappeared into the distance. The Taoist withdrew his gaze, revealing a smile. The congruence and differences arising from the story's characters entering reality, the once young boy and the now great general, whom even the emperor must regard with caution, were truly remarkable.